Hi folks, let's call this a bonus presentation. I want to talk to you about price discrimination, and that is charging different customers different prices. So far, all of our imperfectly competitive markets and perfect competition, all were charging the same price to everyone. Once we got out of perfect competition, we realized that monocomp, oligopoly, and monopoly all had the ability to charge higher prices without losing all of their customers. The closer you got to monopoly, the more of that power that you had. What this gives these folks is the opportunity to start charging different prices to different people. If somebody's willing to pay more, why not charge them more? And if you're losing sales that would make you some profits, why not give those people slightly better prices? Price discrimination is a way to do that. Once we involve ourselves in price discrimination, as almost all imperfectly competitive firms do if they can manage it, it's going to change the model. Demand is still going to matter, but marginal revenue does not. Marginal revenue was derived from the demand curve and based on the idea that there was only one price that all quantity was being sold at. That doesn't make sense anymore. Marginal revenue essentially is going to disappear. It's not even a curve we're going to work with. Now you might be asking, how does this work? How does a firm do it? As we noted earlier, you've got to have market power. If you raise your price and everybody just leaves you, this will never work. Secondly, you've got to be able to figure out who's going to be sensitive to high prices and who is not. You want to charge people who are willing to pay more money, but you don't want to end up accidentally charging a high price to somebody, which means you lose the customer. So how do you do that? Lastly, it's got to be very difficult, unlikely, or illegal to resell the product. Because if you sell cheaply to people who are sensitive to prices, and then they just turn around and sell higher to folks who are insensitive, this is basically just a way to give your profits away to somebody else in a secondary market. Okay, so how does this work? A good example of this is the grocery store. If you go to the grocery store, you'll notice that there's the price that's listed. Then there is the sort of QFC Advantage membership kind of price. Then you can get even better prices if you cut coupons. And you can get an even better price if you agree to buy products in certain bundles. So realistically, any given product on the shelf might have 4 or 5 different prices. The only people who are willing to get the lowest prices are the ones who are the most sensitive and who are willing to become a member, cut coupons, and buy in particular bundles. By identifying themselves as super sensitive, you are making sure that you give them the best possible prices. Anyone who rolls through the door and doesn't even bother to be a member, you're happy to charge them full price for the product. That's a good example of price discrimination. You'll also see it in used car or even new car dealers. They're always happy to charge the highest possible price they can get for a car. The only people who get the best prices for cars are the people who are the most sensitive and who grind the salesman down over time. Okay, how do we actually start graphing this? The minute that you actually start having multiple prices, you've got to start thinking about the fact that quantity blocks are sold at different prices. So if between 0 and Q1 is sold at one price, this is your total revenue. Maybe you sell the first 100 boxes of cereal at $8. But if you sell the next 100 at $5, then of course this doesn't make sense here. Right? This is your total revenue from units 100 through 200. This box is your total revenue for the first 100. So if we think about this, your costs, given the constant returns that I've got here, your cost box for producing these 200 is expressed here. Anything that's above that represents profit. This is awesome because you actually are doing much better than had you had a marginal revenue curve. If you had a marginal revenue curve and you were only going to produce at Q star at the same price, you wouldn't be able to get $8 out of everybody, and some of those $5 sales wouldn't have been willing to purchase from you. So what I want you to recognize is that the amount of deadweight loss is actually starting to disappear. The only part that's still deadweight loss, compared to where we would produce if it was perfectly competitive, is here. This represents a tiny little piece of consumer surplus, and this represents a tiny little piece of consumer surplus. Now, if you successfully keep segmenting the market and you keep coming up with more and more prices that you can charge and keep your customers separate, then of course you can start capturing more and more of the consumer surplus triangle. In this case, very, very, very little is left as deadweight loss. And of course, all of this area represents your profits. Every single one of these generated more revenue than total costs. So, where is this going? Okay, so if you do this perfectly, you end up with a firm that's charging the exact price that everyone is willing and able to pay. In essence, they're going to make consumer surplus disappear. So every single unit up to this Q competitive, because this is where price would equal marginal cost and the quantity that a perfectly competitive firm would create, every single unit up to this point is going to generate a total revenue, or a price in our case, that's higher than the marginal cost of producing it. So every single one of these units is going to cost you the same, given the way that we've structured our cost structure, but that wouldn't matter really. And they are all going to generate prices which are higher than the marginal costs. So every time you're thinking about, should I make the next unit, as long as you can charge a price that's higher than the marginal cost, the answer is yes. And this whole entire triangle, which used to be consumer surplus, is converted into profits. You sell every single unit for the maximum price that someone is willing and able to buy, which of course implies consumer surplus is zero. You've transferred it all into producer surplus. The other nice thing is that the deadweight loss has disappeared. It's gone. You're not missing any transactions anymore. An imperfectly competitive firm is choosing to produce a competitive quantity. This is allocatively efficient. Our last unit had a marginal benefit, the price that the person was willing to pay, equal to the marginal cost to the firm of producing it. You can't get any more efficient. The only thing that's sad about this, from the consumer's perspective anyways, is that there really aren't any good deals anymore. You wouldn't have bought anything that wasn't worth it, but you don't get any consumer surplus from any of these transactions. All of the gains are heavily slanted towards the producer. But this is, and I'll stress it again, incredibly unusual because you have an imperfectly competitive firm that is behaving in a way that is perfectly efficient.